Hello, welcome to the PCM Tech Help Show. I'm your host, Craig Chamberlain. In today's video, we're going to look at the Android and the iPhone. Yes, I have had my hands on both for quite some time now. My wife has an iPhone. I have an Android. So I've kind of had a little bit of both worlds, and I have some thoughts on what's the best out of the two. Apple versus Android. Kind of like a battle, right? Well, hopefully you guys will get some additional insights out of this, because I'm going to go over 7 essential features that these phones should probably be considered, well, compared against when you're actually going to buy one. So let's go ahead and get started. And the first one I decided to go with, my to-do list is right here. We're going to do browsing and internet. Now, the Android phones have a very powerful browser. It uses the Chrome browser that's built into it. The Apple iPhone actually uses the built-in Safari browser. Now, you're going to run into some interesting issues across both platforms. The Android Chrome browser will actually support Flash, whereas the Safari one will not. That does run into some minor issues, nothing real detrimental because Flash is technically being, outdated. But you're also going to run into some performance issues with a lot of the Android sides of it and the Safari sides of it. So the real question is, how much are you going to be using the in-stock app for the actual browser? If you use the Android Chrome browser, it is a very solid and a very fast and a very sleek browser. It works really well and it's very fluid. If you use a Safari browser, in my opinion, it is a little clunky. It runs a little slower, and it also has kind of, a little bit of trouble rendering some websites. Now, that doesn't mean it's a rarity, okay? I literally very rarely have any trouble with the Android phone and the Chrome browser, and I rarely have significant, but I do have issues with the Safari browser on the phone and on the iPad actually. But you can always download a third-party app, but out of stock, I would have to say that in this battle, Android is going to have to take the lead a little bit because the Chrome one is a little more stable, a little more fluid, and it actually runs a little better. That being said, it's not really a deciding factor when buying it. They both work great. So the second topic we're going to cover is maps and GPS. Well, all iPhones come stocked with Google Maps. What they don't come stocked with is the Google Navigation, okay? Google Navigation is a feature-rich navigator that once you've mapped out whatever you're going to, or whatever your destination is, it'll actually instantly slide into the navigator, and you can start navigating from that point. Apple iPhone actually will require a third-party app. Now, there's a couple paid-for ones, they're only a couple bucks, but usually you're going to have to get something aftermarket. You can either go with the Verizon Wireless Nav, the VZ Nav, which will cost a monthly fee, or you can go with the free app. I think, MapQuest has their own. And actually, I did use the MapQuest one, and it does work really well, but nothing in comparison to the Android. Now, I know this will sound like Android fanboyism. We haven't gotten into performance yet, and that's where we're going to kind of hit our hitch on the Android platform. Sure, the Android comes feature-rich with a nice browser and nice internet features. It also comes with a nice navigator, but now we're going to move into hardware options. Well, let's go with music and media, actually. With music and media, the Android does suffer. Okay, Apple has always had the iTunes. It's always been there. It's always been a great feature of the Apple products. As far as visualization is concerned, Android's starting to catch up with the Apple iPhone, but the Apple iPhone has, performance-wise, blown away most of the Android devices that are out there right now. You can go out and buy the latest and greatest Android phone. Sure, it will look great, but for the most part, your battery life's going to suck on those phones. Apple has found the perfect balance between performance and battery life. I have to admit, I've owned about 4 or 5 Android phones, well, 2 or 3 Android phones over the past 4 years since Android started, and I have to admit that that's probably the most appealing part of the Apple iPhone. You're going to get much better battery life, and you're actually going to get a lot better performance out of your apps. We're going to talk about that a little more in the app world. But when you actually come down to hardware performance for media and music, Apple kind of takes the cake on that one. The only thing it slacks in is on your Apple iPhone, actually, you cannot buy external storage. So you're stuck with whatever model you buy. So if you buy the 16 gig, you can't upgrade that without getting a brand new phone. Whereas the Android phones do typically come with SD RAM cards, so you can buy a separate card to slide into it to enhance your memory. It's a lot better than spending $300 on a new phone. You can just slide in a $50 chip for 32 or 64 gigabytes. So that's a nice feature for that. So then let's go into hardware options. Now, Apple doesn't have a lot of options. Obviously, because they're Apple. They're a closed platform company. They make sure that you have to pick their product, their Apple product. But there's a lot of good things about that, and there's a lot of, well, not a lot, there's a few bad things about it. The Android phones give you a lot of options when it comes to hardware options. You can go over and really kind of pick what works for you, what looks the best, what gives you the best user interface, what you're really kind of happy with. The downside of that is typically when app developers are designing applications for that phone, they have to make sure that that application works across multiple pieces of hardware. That's why you run into so many performance issues with Android phones and their apps. Their apps crash quite a bit more often, and they perform quite a bit more clunky as the hardware develops for the Android devices, because the developers start working with the latest and greatest hardware, so you get outdated. Whereas with the Apple iPhone, you run into a different issue. Sure, you can't go out and pick a whole bunch of different phones, but the phone you're going to pick is solid across the board, and it performs every app that you download pretty much flawlessly. And I'm saying that, I'm usually pretty critical about things like this. I'm saying that actually kind of with a little bit of shame, because I've had an Android for so long, but the performance and battery life out of these are so much more efficient that it's hard not to say, if you're going for apps, you might want to lean more towards the Apple iPhone. If you're going for customizability, you're probably going to lean more towards the Android. So let's go into hardware prices, though. So since you have a lot more options on the Android, we're on number 4, by the way. We're on hardware options here. We have a lot of different options for hardware in Android. As a result, there's more of a competitive market for it. So the hardware tends to be more bang for the buck. You're going to go in here and Apple dictates what each Verizon company or AT&T company has to sell this phone for. You cannot get special pricing. You can't get special deals. I don't care who you are, unless you are Bill Gates or you know, somebody who is in the company. You're not going to get special pricing on these devices. It's just, that's the way it's dictated to the market. So you're not going to spend less than $200 on a phone unless Apple decides you can spend less than $200 on a phone, or you can find one on eBay aftermarket. Whereas with this hardware, it's a lot more flexible. When you got a bunch of third parties competing with each other, lots of these phones you can get for free. So when you walk into the store, you might be able to get a phone more powerful than the iPhone on Android for like $50 with your contract. Whereas you would have to buy an iPhone 4 for $100 to $200. 4S would be $200. The iPhone 4 is $100 now. So that's kind of one of the balances when you're talking about pricing. Know that when you walk in there, know you're not going to walk out with an iPhone for less than $100. You're just not. It's not going to happen unless you're somebody special, which I'm not. So let's move into, after hardware prices, we're going to move into the App Store comparisons. Now, the App Store, of course, everyone talks about the numbers, the sheer numbers of apps. There are some definite setbacks with the Apple App Store, okay? Most of the problems with the App Store itself are searching and finding apps that a lot of people are using. Google has kind of perfected with Google Play, that's its App Store. It has kind of perfected the way, it just kind of makes it fun, going and finding new apps, searching for underground apps, finding different upcoming apps. Whereas you run into kind of a lot of issues with the organization of the iTunes Store for finding a lot of things like that. You literally usually have to pull up a third-party website that does it for them, because when you're actually going through the interface on the App Store on the Apple iPhone, it is a lot more difficult to find niche products and niche apps to find exactly what you're looking for. So on that note, while the interface might not be as good, the apps themselves on the Apple, of course, as like I said before, are going to be better. Okay, because the apps are designed for one piece of hardware. When you're a software developer and you're developing applications and you only have to worry about it working on 1 or 2 devices, your software is going to be a lot more stable, it's going to be a lot more fluid, it's going to use a lot less battery life than a Android application which has to work across 10 or 15 phones, and then in the next 2 years work on 10 or 15 new phones. So that's an understandable setback. It's going to happen no matter what. Lastly, we're going to get down to application prices. So when you're at the application store, there's a lot more free options on this particular device. That's the Android. Android market has a lot more free, powerful applications than the Apple Store. I think it's because Apple has a lot more pull. I think it's because they can get away with it a lot more. So when you're buying an Android, you're not going to spend nearly as much on apps that you want as you were when you're buying an Apple phone. That being said, the Apple apps usually perform better than the Android apps, so you're paying for performance over, you know, liability. So when it comes down to it, who wins, right? Well, let's say browsing and internet, I'm going to lean more towards Android, but since you can get a third-party app anyways, it doesn't really matter, and you can kind of find what works for you, so I'd say that's a tie. Okay, that's a tie between both. Maps and GPS, I'm going to go ahead and lean towards Android on this one because Apple does not have a good built-in GPS system at all, and I don't foresee them getting one anytime soon. You have to go third-party on that, and the third-party apps, unless you pay really good money for them, aren't actually as good as the Google Nav, in my opinion. Of course, you might disagree with me on that, so Android's going to have to take that one. For hardware options, of course, you have a lot more options on the Android, so I'm going to lean more towards Android on this one because you can get more of a look or feel or hardware the specification that you really want. But of course, even though you have more options on this, I don't think you're going to get as much value on performance. Usually these perform not as well, even though the hardware can be better, as the Apple, because the Apple has better development because it is one phone. And it usually ends up with better battery life. I'm still leaning more towards the Android just because a lot of people like to pick and choose the hardware itself. That's on the hardware side. For hardware prices, again, I'm going to lean Android on this one. I know you guys think I'm kind of a fanboy, but since it's got a lot more options out there, the pricing is a lot more flexible and the App Store is a lot more affordable. So if you're kind of looking for a cost-effective solution, you might want to lean more towards the Android on that one. Again, even though the prices are more expensive, the performance is going to be better, but you're paying extra money for that. For music and media, I'm leaning more towards the iPhone on that one, of course. It started out as an iPod Touch, and so they integrated that so well into this device, and the software and applications are developed so well for this device that it's hard not to give that credit for that one. App Store comparisons. The store itself, I think the software interface is better on the Android with Google Play, but this is a tough one. Even though the store interface itself is better on the Android, the apps available and the quantity of apps and the stability of the apps is so much better on the iPhone that I'm going to lean more towards iPhone on this one. So there we have iPhone for the App Store comparisons, but it's not by a huge margin. And then, of course, we have application prices, and of course, Android takes that one, but that's kind of... we've talked about that in great detail at this point. So who does that make that wins? We got Android, Apple, Android, tie. So Android technically falls on the positive side of this, but only if you're working on a budget. I mean, if you're working on a budget, Android's probably the best platform. Both platforms are awesome. Android, if you're working on a budget, Android's probably the platform to go to. If you're more concerned with productivity, efficiency, and stability, and battery life, and more performance, then you'll probably want to lean more towards the iPhone. So that's all there is to this video. I know it went a little long. I was kind of trying to be very thorough with how we talked about this. As always, you can follow me on Twitter. That's @CraigChamberlain. You can follow the show on Facebook as well. It's the PC Michiana Tech Help Show on there. If you go to my main website, PCMTechHelp.com, you can link to all those networks there. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, and let me know how this video went. I know my office needs a little work. It's all a work in progress. And let me know if you have any thoughts. What phone are you going to use? Sorry, I got to take this. Just kidding.